Welcome to episode 35 of the We'll Bring the Popcorn podcast. On today's show, we'll be discussing some of the most popular news of the week. It was a little bit slower week, but we do have news that Yellowstone is looking to come back for a season 6, and we also have more talks on the Invincible live-action movie that is happening. We'll also break down the first 3 episodes of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 2, and review the movie AfrAId. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and let's get into it.
Just a reminder to leave a like on our video. Also subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to us in the audio realm, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps the show out. Also go to willbringthepopcorn.com for all of our social media stuff. Give us a follow, give us a like, and also come join us in our Discord and talk movies. We'd love to have you in there and chat, as we like to do every week. But I want to jump into the news now. So Yellowstone, it's not without its controversy, right? It's so much drama going around the show right now. The 5th season, the second half of it's getting ready to come out in November. And we got a bit of interesting news this week, so it does look like they could be in talks for a 6th season. Everybody kind of thought these last few episodes were going to be it for the show, and now that doesn't necessarily appear to be the case.
Yeah, definitely plenty of drama. I mean, it's all of it revolves around Kevin Costner. So,
Absolutely.
he was doing his Horizon epic films, and at the same time that they were doing Yellowstone, so he needed extra time.
Right.
That caused a lot of tension between him and the showrunners, and there was a big will he, won't he, right. If he's going to return it all to the show, and they finally nixed it, saying we're just moving on without him. And it does look like they're going to follow Beth and Rip into season 6. I mean, they did kind of announce season 5 is going to be it, but they're in negotiations right now.
Sure.
With the actor, so it's still not definite that it's going to happen, but it's looking more likely that they're going to try to continue on to season 6, see if it can still hold. I mean, you're missing one main actor, which, I mean, he was a pretty big part of the show, but we'll see how they can kind of spin it and turn it to just following Beth and Rip around.
Yeah, but it's also a show that, as important as Kevin Costner's, John Dutton is to the, overall story, it's the Dutton Ranch, right? But that show is not opposed to, like many other shows, killing main characters off if they need to. Mm-hmm. Nobody's really ever safe, and there's a lot of infighting in the family already on the show that, him going away would probably make sense. They could write it in a specific... Who knows how they're going to tell that story when these episodes come out, because we don't know, we haven't seen it yet, but there's some clever ways they can move on from him. Now, it's interesting that they are going to follow Beth and Rip potentially in season 6, which kind of leads you to believe that, if you've been watching the show, Jamie's plans that he's been brewing at the end of the first part of season 5, probably not going to work out too well for old Jamie, I would say, if we're already talking about, moving on with Beth and Rip, but we'll see when those episodes come out. I'm looking forward to it finally coming out. It feels like this show's been on hiatus for like 7 years at this point, with as much drama as there's been. The writer's strike didn't help a lot. Yeah. But it's been forever since we've got these new episodes. And we've already got, a couple spin-off shows of this, on Paramount Plus. You got two different series that are currently airing on there as well. And now we're talking about a potential 3rd spinoff, into the universe, kind of a new show with, I believe they tabbed Matthew Fox and Michelle Pfeiffer to potentially be in the show. I think they're calling it The Madison.
Yeah, the Madison's going to follow a New York City family in the Madison River Valley of central Montana. I'm not fully caught up on Yellowstone. I haven't watched any of the spinoffs either, so it's something I need to get back into. But that was one, the very first episode of Yellowstone. Yeah. It felt like it was a 4-hour movie. I felt like I watched it for a week just to get through the first episode, and because, it started heavy with a lot of stuff in it. So I enjoy it, but I just haven't had the time to really commit to get into this. But it's again, we just have everything. If it's popular, is getting a universe. When Yellowstone first came out, did we ever expect that we'd have at least 3 spinoffs and, everything else from a show like this? I'm not saying it's a bad show. It's a great show, but
it really took off.
There's certain, I guess, storylines and shows you say, I can see doing a bunch of spinoffs, and is this turning into NCIS? So we're going to have so many different Yellowstones and just keep going with 500 different Yellowstone shows for the next 20 years.
Yeah, the show's the initial Yellowstone show itself is fantastic. I haven't watched either of the spinoffs. I've heard they're pretty good. I heard there's another potential spinoff with the 66 Ranch in the works as well that could be coming too. So it's a lot that's kind of branching off from this really, really popular show, and it's just continuing to just, spread its wings and fly. Like you said, it could turn into like an NCIS type thing where there's 800 different versions of the show across the network on like every day of the week's got a Yellowstone adjacent show to it, and it's crazy to see how much it has taken off. But yeah, just the insane amount of drama floating around the show, specifically Kevin Costner and Taylor Sheridan, who is the showrunner for the show, is not without his controversies as well. The kind of back and forth between the two of them. It's interesting to see how popular this is going to be when it does finally come out this season. Like how big the ratings are. I think they're going to be very big initially, but we'll see if the audience kind of dies down or how many people they might have actually lost because of all of this.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest question now is just how many people are still going to be tuning in after waiting so long for the second half, losing Kevin Costner, all the drama. It could definitely take some of the fans out of it.
Yeah, a lot of online discourse I'm seeing is around a lot of people feeling that type of sentiment. They're just like, well, we're waiting too long. Why should we care at this point? But there's a lot of people that are still heavily invested, obviously. So it remains to be seen. We're going to get these episodes in November. I'm excited to check them out and see where this story goes from here, especially what it's going to look like without Kevin Costner, who is such an important part of the show. Like at the core of the show, he's in a good 50+% of the show, not counting all the stuff they spin off with, like, a lot of the other, Duttons and the family and, people adjacent to it. But it's going to be interesting to see how the show moves forward for sure.
Kind of moving on to our next story. So, July, August was a pretty big month for Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively.
No doubt.
Deadpool and Wolverine has done amazing. It's still doing amazing, but Blake's It Ends With Us did very well. It's like $250 million made on this adaptation of the book. But there's been a lot of drama and controversy that's come out of that as well, because there's a lot of fan backlash of how Blake did all her press and everything, of what she was saying in it. She was kind of pitching her stuff more than the movie. They wanted her to, I think, talk more about the domestic abuse stuff that was in there, but they were just kind of going after her for stuff she said. Well, it also turns out that her and the main star and director, which is Justin Baldoni, they've been feuding. Like, they did not get along during the filming of the movie at all. They've been going at each other. Like, they didn't even do press together. He was off on his own. She was with everybody else. Crazy. Like, there's a big split and a big feud. The problem is, this movie's doing really good. There's more books in the series. Yep. If they greenlight the next one, his company has to greenlight the sequel. Yeah. So he has to be involved in some way with it. So it's going to be interesting to see how the studio maybe steps in and tries to resolve something here, because they don't want to have anything to do with each other, but she's the main star, and his company has a big part of whether it goes on. I mean, like I said, it had a $25 million budget, and it's made $250 million so far. So that's a good return on investment there. I don't see them wanting to let it end with just the first one.
Yeah, and it's one of those is the money aspect of it going to be the thing that kind of gets them all on the same page, at least to do the film, right? So, like you said, it made a whole bunch of money. That's just as good a reason at the end of the day to move forward with it, personal differences aside or not. We've seen so many instances throughout the years of people, having this beef and eventually squashing it to come together to, make something new together, right? Like, we literally were just talking about, Ryan Reynolds and Wesley Snipes being at each other for years, and Ryan personally reaching out to Wesley to be in Deadpool and Wolverine. Mm-hmm. It's not the exact same when you're dealing with a company that owns the rights to these books that would have to greenlight a film or anything specific. But, you do see instances like that where people can come together. This does seem like a little bit of a messy situation between these two, and we don't know all the details as to, like, where this stuff originated from and, what's causing them to be that much at odds. But at the end of the day, this was a very successful collaboration between the two of them. Will it turn into more books? Will they eventually greenlight the film and recast, somebody other than Blake Lively in the role? That is also possible. Mm-hmm. Not saying it would be the best of ideas, but it wouldn't be the first time it's happened in film.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on what they're able to get worked out with his company. Like, do they pay off the company to get the rights from them, to move on from him and the company, or do they move on from Blake? But, it's kind of difficult. Like, I don't really know the story of it. My wife's read the book. She watched and enjoyed the movie and everything, but I don't really know the story behind it. So, I don't know if his character moves on into the next book or not, or if he's gone after book one and it's just dealing, maybe just a studio deals with his studio and he never has any contact for, to get a new director, get more people in there, and they try to just kind of build a wall between him and Blake, and his company can be a part of it, but he's not a part of it.
Personally attached to it. And that may be something they wind up coming to an agreement on a compromise for, right? It very much could be that. But I know a lot of people, when they have their, creative clause in something, it's hard for them to let it go. You know what I mean? Especially if it's something that's successful, you kind of want to latch yourself to it and be a part of it. So I understand that dynamic too. But we'll see where this story winds up going, because there's a lot of things still in play and a lot of things they still need to figure out for sure.
Yeah, because you had Ryan and Blake on a high with everything going, and then all this came out, and it just kind of sullied that a little bit for them. Just like, okay, just like, she has, I don't think she's been able to enjoy it. But, and again, we don't know how much was her. We don't know how much is, I'm not a drama guy, so I haven't gone that deep into the drama of exactly what happened between them. I don't think they've specifically went into details on it, but yeah, it's just interesting to see something that has been so successful. Just about everything that's being talked about the film is the drama.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, because from what I've heard, I haven't seen the film yet myself. I want to see it, but from what I've heard, it's a really good movie. Obviously, commercially, it's been successful, so hopefully we'll see if they can, come to an agreement and move forward with the stories they want to tell with the rest of the books, for sure.
Yeah, we'll see, because right now it's a mess.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to leave it and kind of move on to some more positive news. We got some news coming out that Sigourney Weaver is going to be in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which is awesome. We love Sigourney Weaver. She's also been teasing that she may potentially return as Ripley in a future Alien project as well, which would be amazing. She was so fantastic in the first two Alien movies, and this is a good get for Mandalorian and Grogu as well.
Yeah, I would love to see her return to Ripley if you have someone like Fede come back and do something with her, because you can check out our review of Alien Romulus, and we really enjoyed it overall. It had its issues and problems, but it was miles ahead of kind of her last appearance as Ripley. Everyone's definitely mixed on that film and where it kind of left everything, but I mean, it's such a legendary character. Alien and Aliens is just two legendary movies that she just, I mean, both of them are iconic in different ways. Absolutely. Because of the action of the second one, but the horror and the tension and just everything that the first one brought, and she just nailed it completely. Fantastic. And just love everything and I can't think of anything that I haven't enjoyed that she's done. So if she feels, other than, the later Alien movies, which I'll still watch, but turn my brain off a little more on what they do with that. But to have her in Mandalorian and Grogu, I'm curious to see what she may do. We know that we've had some people pass away, and maybe she's replacing some characters, or, kind of what her role is. We don't really know what she might be doing in there. She never appeared in the series, so we don't know what they have planned for her in the movie.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what role she finds herself in, but yeah, I mean, that movie's going to get a lot of buzz, especially as it gets closer to coming out. You hear all the things that they're doing as far as, bringing, Ahsoka and, Mandalorian and Grogu and everything, kind of tying it all together. And this could be the big last hurrah for that story anyway. Mm-hmm. So adding somebody, of the caliber of Sigourney Weaver to it as well, just in my opinion, is going to make whatever they're doing even better. And I just can't wait for this thing to finally come out, because it feels like we've been talking about that forever too, and it's gonna be here before we know it, and I'm excited that they got her attached to it.
Yeah, how much Grogu merch are we gonna see? We're gonna have like Grogu everywhere, with his soup bowl be a popcorn bucket that you can reach into a soup bowl and pull out some popcorn, like
that, or a Mandalorian helmet. Like, it's got to be one or the other. Like, popcorn buckets are the thing now, and like it's so fun to see like all of the creative stuff that's coming out with it. I know you and I were talking about the cool Batman one that's coming out that you actually get to plug in.
I want it, but I don't need it. But I want it, but I don't need it.
I have to have it. Like, I have to have it. It's, it's something I need. You plug in, it's the bat signal, and it's a popcorn bucket. Like, what else? Like, it's the perfect popcorn bucket.
That's definitely become big, but I mean, the prices are also getting big. It's $20, $25 for these popcorn tins, but they're selling. Like, we've got the Ghostbusters one over there that, was very big with Afterlife and everything, that, the popcorn tins, which used to be like $10 with popcorn, that you'd get the regular actual tin buckets, and now they have the more intricate ones that are more like $25. It's a lot of fun, but finding a place to house all of them is like, okay, where am I putting all of these? I want every single one, because even with Alien Romulus, you had the xenomorph head, which I didn't end up picking up one, but I'm like, the xenomorph head eating popcorn out of it.
It's pretty cool. Like, it's some of the creative stuff that people are coming up with. I love it. I'm excited to see what else they come up with.
Yeah, and again, Sigourney Weaver joining it, Mandalorian Grogu is going to be a lot of fun. We'll see if they do end up bringing her back for Ripley, and it's glad that she's on board, and they're not going to try to recast, because if you've watched Romulus, you kind of know the timeline and where it takes place. Could they squeeze something else after, maybe between 2 and 3, do something different? Because, Romulus was between 1 and 2, so we could see them still trying to play in that era, and maybe there was something else that Ripley did, or maybe it is something that continues on after where she was at from her last appearance. But yeah, we'll see if they end up going that route or not, because she seemed like pretty content if it doesn't happen. Ripley has deserved her rest, so if it doesn't happen, it's not a big deal to her.
Yeah, it's exciting to see that she could potentially come back, though, and if they do, hopefully it's in a role that makes sense, and we'll definitely support it when that time comes.
Now, another big character that it's been dormant for a couple years now, because, Daniel Craig has finished his run as James Bond. We've had a ton of rumors of even announcement that there has been casting, and then it's like, no, we haven't cast anybody.
So funny.
Nobody is James Bond yet, but it does seem like things are moving forward to get our next iteration of James Bond, as they're currently interviewing directors and talking to directors to potentially take it on.
Yeah, the fan casting for this has been kind of all over the map. I know there's been like a lot of people rumbling to get Idris Elba to be James Bond at one point. There's also a big push that a lot of people seem to think it's going to be Aaron Taylor Johnson, like, is going to be the next Bond, which would be great casting. I've heard some people in the Tom Hardy camp, like
Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill can do everything, but it's going to be interesting to see who they casted, because typically when they do these, they sign on for several films. So there's a ton of James Bond books out there that they can adapt, and the opportunity to play that role has been huge for everybody who's done it. And it maybe not George Lazenby, but still, like, everybody else is iconic in each of their roles in their own ways, and it's going to be interesting to see who's the next person to take up that mantle, because there's, like I said, there's so many books that they can adapt, and it's a big time deal when you get cast that.
Especially with like Daniel Craig's version of Bond, it was quite different than Pierce and Sean Connery's and everybody else's. It was much darker, grittier. The action was more
really good.
on. It was really good, but I mean, they also changed a little bit of his womanizing and how he was in it. And I mean, he still had his women and everything, but it wasn't as prolific as the Bond girls of the past and everything. So it was a bit of a departure. So it's going to be interesting to see, and maybe that's what they've been doing, is trying to figure out, all right, what's the direction we go now that, it's not the same as Daniel Craig's, but we take what worked there and, morph it into something else, because each actor gets to kind of transform James Bond into, I mean, you have your core basics that you have to have for Bond, but, each actor gets to transform the character itself into, what it is. And I really love Daniel Craig's version of it. I mean, I like the grittier, darker, more serious kind of version of it. Do they go back to little more fun, silly, over-the-top versions, or I think that's probably why they're going with the director who's going to lead that, because that's what's going to kind of set the starting point for it. Is, if we're going to this style, well, we need this type of director to kind of take it off, and we go from there.
Yeah, and I remember a lot of the uncertainty and backlash even around when they announced that it was Daniel Craig that was going to be it. Who's this blonde-haired, blue-eyed James Bond that we're getting? Like, he doesn't look anything like any of the other, Bonds we've had, and he wound up killing it. Like, the movies I thought were really, really good, and some of the strongest Bond movies were the Daniel Craig ones. Come fight me on that one, Internet, because I know there's some people out there that strongly disagree, but I think a lot of them were some of the strongest. I put them up there with some of the Sean Connery films, some of the Roger Moore films, even the Pierce Brosnan ones. I think he did a really, really good job, and it's gonna be hard to kind of be the next person to take up that mantle. But as an actor, you couldn't not want to play this role. I can't imagine anybody not being interested in it, only because like it has a lot of your cool factor instantly goes up if you're James Bond, right? You get the cool tech, you get the awesome cars, you get to, you get cast with these amazingly beautiful women that get to play these Bond girls, and even it's been cool to see that role kind of evolve, and like these women are just, these awesome, strong, characters as well that they get to be, in these last few films at least. And it's going to be fun to see the next evolution of this character and these types of stories they tell. I've even heard there was a possibility of having a female 007 at one point, which I know could potentially get a lot of backlash.
That was a big rumor with Daniel Craig's last, that they were potentially setting up for a female to take over, but we don't really get too many continuations between the different versions of Bond. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different directions that could go with it. But I love Daniel Craig as Bond, but it's also a big time commitment, just like doing Marvel or DC or something. Like, you're signing your life away for the next 10, 15 years being Bond, just because they have, we're going to do this many films, or I don't even know if they plan ahead of how many, or if they still just do it one by one until they feel like they've gone through it all. But yeah, it's a big role to take on for many different reasons, but it's a huge commitment in there. And we'll see, because a lot of the actors that they have, fan cast and rumored, either DC or Marvel people who have done big commitments to the comic book realm. Will they go with someone like that, or is it going to be someone who hasn't really committed to something big like that?
Yeah, it's an interesting decision they got to make. I know typically when these guys sign on to do these movies, I think it's a 3 to 4 film usually commitment. How many Daniel Craig Bonds were there? Were there 4?
I think we got 5.
4 or 5. So you're in that sweet spot of 3 to 5 movies typically that you're signing on, which is not an insignificant commitment, because these films take a while to make. And I know Daniel Craig famously towards the end of his Bond run here says he's glad he never has to do it again, because just the toll that it took on him to make these movies. He did a lot of his own stunts in a lot of these films too, so it's a big time commitment, it's a big toll on your body, but he's definitely reaping the rewards of it, because his career definitely shot up and skyrocketed outside of getting to do those movies. And that's kind of really what really set him off in the eyes of Hollywood, really. And now he's starting to do all these other cool films and projects because of it.
Yeah, you get to see him do some in like the Knives Out series. Absolutely. And everything. Fantastic. Where he's not really having to do action. He can be a little sillier and goofier, doing the murder mystery type thing. So he's exploring a lot more genres now after doing Bond, because it took a toll on his body and his health, because he wasn't, what was he, in his mid-40s, I think, when he started. So, that for the physical to keep in shape with all the stunts and action and everything, like it can take a toll on you. So it's really going to be interesting to see the age range we go into as well, because I think most of them have been in the 30s or 40s. Do they go someone younger in their 20s, or do they go for an older Bond and kind of look at, even older where Daniel Craig left it, to see, all right, what about Bond in his later years? So, what are we looking at with that? But there's a lot of different ways they can go, and they've been taking their time to try to figure it out. But yeah, moving forward with, talking to directors, it seems like they're really starting to put things in place to start moving forward.
Yeah, that's exciting. And hopefully, once they get it all lined up, we get more Bond stories. Those are always fun to go watch, or some of my favorite films to go see in the movies, just because you can kind of go and just take in all of the splendor. It's fun action, witty dialogue at points, and just some really fun stories that you could tell. I'm excited each time one of those comes out.
Oh yeah, those are made to watch in a movie theater.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of the reasons we enjoy going to the movies as much as we do. Now, one thing that is been in talks for almost 7 years now, that we're just still waiting to see if it's ever going to officially, finally get made, because it feels like it's been pre-production forever, is a live-action Invincible film. Now, Invincible is a very popular adult animated series on Amazon Prime Video. It's written by Robert Kirkman, who's infamous for The Walking Dead comic books and, kicking off that show and everything. It seems like he's still talking about this movie as if it's going to be made at some point, but he's kind of had some fun joking around with how long it's actually taking to get done.
Yeah, because he was joking that Timothy Chalamet, I'm already butchering his name. That Chalamet could end up playing Omni-Man, because it might take him so long. So, I mean, guy's in his 20s still, so that could be quite a ways longer. But yeah, I even forgot that they announced that there would be any sort of live action to it. That's definitely going to be a very hard R, if not like NC-17 or something, like a hard cut if it, does a theatrical run, and maybe there's an unedited cut or something. Because if you've watched the animated series at all, you know that they go very brutal with the violence and everything else with it. So doing that in live action is going to be very interesting, because to see that brutality on screen with we've kind of got that in The Boys, so it's going to be, I would say, very similar in The Boys. But how do you take The Boys kind of violent style into a movie in the movie theater? Because that's going to be very brutal.
It's going to be a fun thing for them to try to figure out. I love Invincible. It's a show I've really enjoyed both seasons that have been out. It felt like it took forever to get season 2, but we finally got it earlier this year, and it seems like it'll be a little bit quicker turnaround to get to season 3 this time, thankfully. But yeah, interesting to see who they could potentially get cast in this, because I know Steven Yeun's done a fantastic job as a voice actor of Invincible, but is he suited to play the character on screen or not?
He's a little older now. So.
Yeah, and the character, that is Invincible is a teenager. So do they go the teen route? Do they go the early 20s route maybe with the actor? It's going to be very interesting to see how they cast that, because it is a very brutal TV show. Like, when I say adult, it is very, very much not intended for kids. Like, very graphically violent, some language as well. Not quite boys level type language, fortunately, but the violence part of it is right on par with what The Boys does as far as violence goes. But man, it's going to be interesting to see how they can pull that off in live action, because there's a lot of mixing with like alien races and things like that could make for an interesting make on the big screen, not in the animated realm for sure.
As Robert said, it has to be absolutely perfect, is kind of what he said, that he's not looking just to make it a cheap grab and get on the popularity and stuff with it, that, they're not going to also try to just take the animated series and bring it into a movie. Like, they're trying to make it its own thing. So it's, it's adapting the comic, it's taking what they've done in the series and turning that into something new and interesting that gets people like, well, I've read the comics, well, I've seen the animated series, why do I want to see the live action? I think that's where they're at right now. It's like, how do we set that apart from the comics, from the series, but also making sure that we do right by the character?
And I always get concerned when you hear somebody say we want it to be perfect, because when you start chasing perfection, you start to nitpick, you start to kind of overthink things. And I hope that's not the case when they go to do this. But I get what he's saying. He wants to be set. I don't know if he necessarily would settle for being satisfied with the story that they put together, or how they're going to set this up. But the word perfection kind of concerns me when you start talking about stuff like this, because if you're looking for something to be absolutely perfect, it's never going to get made.
We'll see if this ends up like George R.R. Martin in his latest novel.
That's a whole. I could do a whole show on that, because
it's been 47 years since he announced.
That's been a whole mess with that, and people are kind of giving him flack for it. For good reason. I know the creative process does take time, but good Lord, get it done. But yeah, when you start chasing perfection like that is when, you kind of wonder if it's ever going to see the light of day at that point. You know what I mean? So
yeah, because he even joked, because they're trying to go for perfection, that it may be another 20 years before they get it done. But
so crazy.
And seeing if, he's still in the industry in 20 years, depending on how everything goes. I mean, he's a hot commodity with The Walking Dead and with Invincible doing well, but you just never know how things are going to go. So we'll see if it actually ever comes to fruition, but it's still in the works. They're still trying to get it made, but it still could be quite a while before we see that.
Yeah, hopefully eventually someday it does, because like I said, I've really enjoyed the show, and seeing it move into the big screen in a live action role could be very interesting if they do it right. Don't chase perfection. Just give us a good movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, moving over to our last story with Netflix. So, we've talked about it a few times that Netflix is getting WWE, and January Raw starts on Netflix. So it was kind of interesting to see that they're doing a documentary about Vince McMahon, because if you're not in the wrestling world, if you haven't heard a lot of it, there's a lot of controversy, a lot of problems, a lot of things that's happened with Vince McMahon. He's had to, forcibly step away from the WWE because of things that he's done and committed while he was running the company. And before Netflix gives us Raw, they're giving us this documentary about Vince.
Yeah, and the key word that you got to remember is he's the former owner of WWE at this point. So earlier this year, they announced a major merger with TKO Sports to form TKO Sports with the owners of the UFC, the parent company of that, to form TKO Sports. They're kind of a combined entity now, and they're working together. And you see some of the crossover already starting, and some of the things they're planning to work together on. And this is something that's been in the works for a minute. Like, I've been hearing about this documentary for a while now, just because I am closely attached to the wrestling world as much as I love it. And, Vince McMahon, if you grew up watching wrestling at any point in your life, Vince McMahon has been on your TV screens. He's one of, just independently of anything he's done in his personal life, just as an on-screen character, one of the best villains in the history of the wrestling business on screen. And unfortunately, it feels like a lot of that has bled over into the real life. WWE's not been without its controversies over the years with, the steroid scandals in the 80s, which I'm sure they'll touch on, and unfortunately the more recent, like, sexual assault allegations that have come up against him, that's still being litigated in court. We're not going to dive into any of the graphic details, but the information's out there if you want to seek it out as to, what all he's being accused of and some of the horrific things that you're hearing that he allegedly did, that he's being, litigated for, that's kind of, in a way, forced them to kind of sell the company, because for the longest time, this was a privately held company that eventually became public in the early 2000s. But even then, he had such a strong stranglehold on the boardroom, on all the inner day-to-day workings of the company, the president, CEO, head honcho, head guy at the table, had been for years, that none of us ever really thought that even when he died, like, you figure he would leave the company to his kids and it would stay in the family. And in a lot of ways, the family's still kind of running the day-to-day operations of it, but him as a figurehead is completely removed from it. Something I never thought I would see, like, ever really, like, because he's been so synonymous with that company. And now you're going to finally get to see some of the gritty undertones of this, the man outside of the company and some of the things he's done, and it's finally going to get unearthed and talked about. And it's going to be very interesting to see how they frame this and how they tell the story because of this working relationship that they do have a WWE now with Raw coming on Mondays. It's going to be very interesting to see how this is going to shake out.
Yeah, because you mentioned his kids were a part of the company too. I mean, right when everything was coming out, Stephanie ended up stepping down and stepping away. Of course, she's married to Triple H, who's, I guess, running the company now, correct?
He's running the creative part of the company. He's on the executive board, but he does everything you see on the TV screen WWE wise, from Raw, SmackDown, NXT. Triple H is the head of creative. He's the VP of creative. He's also the chief content officer of the company. So he's still a major figurehead in the company, maybe not directly the president and CEO. So he's got a seat at the table still.
Yeah, he probably would have had a hand in this then, which is interesting because it's helping greenlight or move forward with a documentary about your father-in-law.
Right.
Your former boss who gave you your job and your start in wrestling and everything, that you're, going to do this documentary about his shortfalls. And because it says it's going to talk to the family. It says they have interviews with Vince and stuff before all the allegations and everything come out. They're going to talk to wrestlers and other people who have been involved in the WWE, WWF, with all that name change, which still gets me that after so long that the World Wildlife Foundation came after him for the name and got it. Like, how
that's a crazy story in and of itself.
Yeah, I wonder if it touches on anything. We don't know if it's all about the allegations or if it's going to be about his rise and his fall and everything, if they're going to start about how
far back
how WWF started and everything like that. But it definitely looks like it's going to be touching on the controversies a bit here, but to have the family involved and have wrestlers and everybody else, it's going to be really interesting to see how they do this documentary and how badly it portrays him or the company or anything else, because like we said, in just a couple months they're going to start airing WWE.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, like I said, to see how they frame it. There's a lot of people in the wrestling business that have very, very strong opinions about Vince, both good and bad. Obviously, the good, the things he did for people in their careers and things like that, but also the bad, that the things that he did for people in their careers. So it's going to be fun to see how it's all like put together. Obviously, separating the man from this completely. It's a very interesting story about a very interesting man whose life is, if you've done any research on the life he's had from the beginning of his life till now, it's a very interesting case, and I will be right there on September 25th when it does come out on Netflix to check this out and see what it looks like. Because as a lifelong wrestling fan myself, I know a lot of the backstory and a lot of the things that are going to go into it, and I just want to see how they shape it into this story for this documentary that they're putting together. Is it just fact? Like, what are they going to try to embellish? How are they going to try to frame it? How they're going to try to portray him? Especially now with this, are they going to go lighter because they are, in partnership with them now, or are they going to just kind of lay it all out there and let people take the information as they can? We'll see.
Yes, I just checked my notes. They are talking, the journalists who uncovered all of his allegations and everything that came after him, they're going to be talking with him as well. So it does kind of sound that they're going to kind of go all in on it. Yeah. And, we even, as we mentioned in our last episode, talking about the Hulk Hogan biopic, that's no longer happening. I'm curious if we get a Vince one, but, they're also doing it's either a film or a series about Hulk Hogan's whole Gawker scandal with his tape and everything that was released. So we're getting a lot of the darker, grittier side of wrestling, because we also got, which we really enjoyed the film, but we got the biopic of the Von Erich family, which was such a dark story. Like, we're getting kind of the darker parts of wrestling here, which is interesting to see. That side of it all and what they put their bodies through and what these families and other people have gone through. And we've definitely got a lot that's coming out from the wrestling world lately when it comes to documentaries and series and movies and everything.
Yeah, another one I want to highlight, if you are curious to hear some of these stories about some of the most interesting times in the wrestling world, there's a show on Vice TV, but you can find it on YouTube if I'm not mistaken, called Dark Side of the Ring. That is a very fantastically well-made series as well. It's got a couple seasons, but it talks about some of the more interesting times in the wrestling world, some interesting stories and kind of the real life happenings behind, a lot of these stories, and specifically people, maybe feuds in wrestling, like the real life drama that goes, into some of this stuff and some of the things that a lot of these people who are unfortunately no longer with us, kind of telling some of their story. Like, it's a very fantastic and well-made story that if you're interested in that type of thing, it's definitely worth checking out.
And if you want to check out the Netflix documentary, it's called Mr. McMahon. It will be on Netflix this month on September 25th.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to checking that out. So now I want to pivot to our TV review of the week. We have the first 3 episodes of Season 2 of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. It's dropped on Amazon Prime. You can check that out right now. And this starts to kind of pick up from where we left off at the end of Season 1, so we are going to get into a little bit of light spoiler stuff. We're not going to go through and talk about everything directly plot-wise from episode to episode, but we're going to talk some light spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen it yet, maybe jump ahead to our film review or come back to us when you've gotten a chance to watch this. But it kind of picks up from where Season 1 ended it off. Season 1, if you saw it, you had the eruption of Mount Doom. You had, this stranger character like revealed to be Sauron at this point, and you're starting right in the immediate aftermath with the follow-up to that. And it kind of starts off in a way that kind of took me a little bit aback, as to like they did like an immediate jump back before they jumped ahead to where he currently is. So it's kind of an interesting way, a very graphic way to kind of start Season 2.
Yeah, we'll say the first season was very controversial around fans and stuff. They were very mixed on how they felt about this series. I enjoyed it overall, but there were some issues and problems. It's definitely not Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings and everything else. And, I've read The Hobbit, I've read The Lord of the Rings. I haven't gone into the deeper stories and past those two, but this is diving back into the history before The Hobbit, before The Lord of the Rings, of how Sauron became who he was and how the Rings of Power were created and everything else back that. But yeah, as you mentioned, it was very like brutal and more graphic. So we kind of jump back in time, that we have Sauron doing a speech to the orcs, and he's telling his basically master plan that we're going to enslave Middle Earth and we're going to take over this world and everything else. And they were like, nah, we're not interested. They attack him. Like, they go full on in on him and
Very brutal way.
We get, very brutal. And we get to see kind of, because we know he's a shapeshifter and that he's kind of an immortal type of character. You know, he was able to basically embed himself into the tower and the rings and have all this stuff to where he's almost like you could compare Voldemort, which was written much later than Lord of the Rings, of a character that's somehow able to keep themselves alive past even their like physical death has happened.
Yeah, it's an interesting character just to see how he can kind of adapt and evolve, and you get a lot of that throughout these first 3 episodes. So like I said, it picks up kind of at the end of that. You jump in, you start dealing with, you know, how these characters have moved on past this episode. You get Galadriel and Elrond kind of, you know, at the end of this first season, the rings are made for the elves at this point. So you get the first part of, you know, the first set of rings are made, and kind of the fallout from that, where Elrond, you know, no longer trusts Galadriel, and you have some of the fallout in their relationship and, you know, their friendship here, and you get some of that inner workings of, you know, there's this very real existential threat for the elves and their time in Middle-earth before they have to, and you ultimately see where that goes if you've watched the Lord of the Rings movies, but you kind of get to see how that process kind of gets delayed thanks to the rings, and, you know, Elrond's struggling to, you know, convince these guys not to use them, to destroy them, because he doesn't really trust how they were made and the power that they have. And
because he feels like Sauron had something to do with it, that his evil, his magic, what he has was kind of embedded in these rings, and he doesn't trust that power's not corrupted.
Right, and you see you get to see some of the internal struggle that he has with that, and a lot of the distrust he has with, you know, especially Galadriel and how she's influencing, you know, the High King, and, you know, you see the appeal these rings are starting to have to these guys, and there's a nice, interesting conversation with one of his elders that he kind of talks to, and he's like, you know, these rings, they could be used for evil, but if they're being worn by people you trust and care about, do you trust that they will use them for good? That kind of thing. So it was kind of a fun conversation that they had that I really appreciated eventually in that too. And you start to see some of the other characters that we got used to in season 1, kind of where they landed and where they're taken off, especially with, you know, Nori and, you know, the wizard who are, you know, moving on and trying to find this place, Rune, that the wizard just feels compelled that he needs to go to. He feels like he's destined to go there for some reason, and you get a little bit of that story as well. And it's, in my opinion, I think they took some of that positive momentum they were starting to get towards the end of season 1, and I think it really rolls over into season 2 quite nicely, because I'm really enjoying how it's taking off so far in this, you know, everything that they're setting up in this.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so far. It was kind of interesting to drop 3 episodes right at the beginning here, because I think overall it was like almost 3.5 hours worth of, like 3 hours and 20 minutes between, because I think the first episode was a little bit longer and the other 2 were right about an hour, but there's a lot of stories to be followed here, and I think that was some of the issue that people had with the first season. It just didn't feel like, well, we got different tales going on, but we didn't get a whole lot flushed out with all of them. But we also got a lot of different looks at these characters, so we haven't dove too deep, you know, in the first 3 episodes and with the hobbits, and we followed them around for a little bit, but we're still trying to figure out what's going on. We still don't know who this stranger is. Is it going to end up being Gandalf? Is it going to be someone that we know that, you know, he looks very similar to kind of what we know from Ian McKellen's Gandalf, but we don't really know who he is and what his importance yet is going to be to the story, because we know he's going to play a big importance. We just don't know exactly what yet. But I think that was also kind of the biggest problem I had with the first 3 episodes, is just there's so much. Like, this is a series you have to pay attention to, because we have so many different stories going on at one time between the elves and the dwarves and the men and the hobbits. And like, we're in the Lord of the Rings has always kind of been that way, but, you know, fitting 3 or 4 different tales in one episode can be a lot to try to wait. Okay, so this happened. So this is, okay, we're with the men now, and this is what's happening. All right, now we're with the elves. This is what's happening. It just can be a lot to try to follow, but I am enjoying kind of what's going on. But I'm really waiting to see if with this season, and I think we're still only like, 8 episodes? So we've got the first 3, so we've got 5 more to go after this. Kind of how we bring these characters together, or if their stories are still going to be as separate as they are still after these first three.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like so far that there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of their worlds to kind of cross over, with the exception of maybe the dwarves and the elves, who are kind of mixing in together a little bit. And then you get a little bit of elf and man mix up too, because especially in the third episode, we get kind of the return of, the main elf from season one that wasn't Elrond, that was, with Bronwyn and all the stuff that happened in that fight, and how that ended up. You get some forward movement in that. You find out a character who's presumed dead isn't really dead as well, and that's a fun story in the third episode. But now you're starting to get by the end of the third episode, you're getting the dwarves' rings, and the dwarves are going through their own, their own tragedy that it seems to be very much manufactured by Sauron to justify these rings getting made, right? Mm-hmm. Each of these groups facing their own existential crises that, these rings are all the answers to all your problems kind of thing. And it's a really fascinating way of kind of telling the story. I like the interpersonal relationship between Durin and his dad.
I would say, I like the dwarf story so far. The dwarf story
was really good. It was really well told. I kind of like that it's busy, only because, like, a lot of times there's a lot of shows that I feel we can watch where you can kind of have your phone out and kind of looking at stuff and having it on the background that you can kind of follow, but you don't have to sit there and lock in to watch to kind of get the gist of what's going on. But what I really like about this show is I have to put my phone down to watch this, or I'm going to be lost. Like, it's a good way, like, don't feel like you have to watch all 3 episodes at once. Like, you can watch an episode, just block out an hour of your time and kind of focus on the story and come back to it when you have time. That's the beautiful thing about, watching shows like this, is you don't have to binge it. This is not in my opinion, it's not a bingeable show that you can, like, just, unless you're, like, really hardcore into Lord of the Rings, which I am, but I could see where a lot of people were like, I can't sit and watch this for more than an hour. Like that.
Oh, yeah. I end up having to kind of binge them because of just time constraints and stuff. So I watched the first 2 back to back, and I got to the point, like, all right, I'm enjoying it, but I can't watch another hour. Like, I need to break it up, and I'll watch the other one a little bit later, just because it is very heavy on the storytelling and the dialogue, and trying to remember, all right, who's this character, what's this name, who's this, who's that. Like, there's a lot of information and a lot of things kind of happening at the same time. Like, we're not delving too deep into the story, but there is a lot of movement and things going, because overall we're dealing with Sauron. So it's dealing with his reach and everything that's going on. So we have Galadriel has told the elves that he's here, he's back, this is who the stranger on the other side. So we had 2 strangers. So we have the wizard stranger and we had the man stranger. One is Sauron. Yep. We'll see who ends up being the wizard. But, she ends up telling the elves, so that's kind of what helps set forward of them maybe trusting in wearing the rings and doing that. And with the dwarf story, we're dealing with the Durin and his father and the son. When we left off, he basically banished his son. Neither of them, dwarves are very proud people, so neither of them want to apologize. Neither of them want to say they're sorry and do it. But we got some good dialogue and some good revelations from the king to Durin's wife, and then she's kind of being the in-between both of them, of like, well, you need to stop being stubborn, but you also need to stop being stubborn. Just one of you stop being stubborn and get this settled. But we also see the darkness is kind of spreading over the land, so we kind of start with the dwarves, that we have what appears to be like an earthquake that happens, and it shuts out a lot of the light into their caves and tunnels and everything, and they're kind of worried about what this means. And we also see that going over the elves and man. So we see this darkness is starting to rise across Middle Earth.
Yeah, and it obviously, you see, if you know the Lord of the Rings movies, you know where these things wind up, and it's fun kind of working your way back, because you get all these characters laid out in the movies, and it's fun to see the younger versions of these characters that you hear about in those original movies kind of coming back and seeing how they got there and how these rings came into be, because you get kind of, I don't want to like diminish it because they do a good enough job, but it's kind of really blowing by like how these things come to be in like a passing story that's told in like 3 minutes.
This is basically the intro of the Fellowship. Was telling in like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, telling you how the rings were made and how Sauron was defeated. Yeah,
and then go. So now you're going back to how Sauron came to be Sauron, like the this immensely, overpowered villain that, everybody's working to destroy. But you get a lot of fun interpersonal relationships. You get a lot of forward movements. One of the things, and this is my biggest, it's so silly, but it's my biggest, what the hell moment from this season. And it seems so silly, given the grand scheme of all the story, but there's a moment in episode 3 that it made me laugh out loud at how absurd it was. But there's, you get this story of, the queen who is blind, and dealing with the fallout of the stuff that happened with that, group of people in season 1. Now it's moving into this season. The folks are, starting to doubt the queen. Like they're starting to want to rise up and kind of overthrow the queen. Maybe they don't feel like she's fit to lead. There's a point where there's this speech that she begins to give, and a lady just walks up and slaps her.
Yeah.
Slaps her right in the face. And nothing happens to the lady. She goes and, the queen obviously understands the pain. Who did you lose? And she was like, my son. She goes up and gives her a hug. And I'm like, in what medieval realm have we ever watched in all of history where you can walk up and slap the queen and you're not instantly killed?
And this is her coronation. So that was her coronation she was a queen regent at that time. Yes. So they're here to officially make her the queen after the king passed and everything. And she just gets slapped in the face. And she calls him off and gives her a hug. And I understand it's a mother who's sad. And it was a kind of a touching, but it was also, wait, but you also just slapped a blind lady,
right,
and everything.
In what world would you not be taken out in the street and either beheaded or hung for that?
But I thought you were going to touch on another part, which is I had two kind of silly parts of this series that kind of really, because mine was later after that is when the Farazan, who's basically this other guy who he's the one kind of leading up this kind of charge of, all right, let's spread some doubt and maybe I'll become king instead of her becoming queen. And we have this moment, so there's a little bit of spoilers if you don't want to know about kind of this part of it. It's not a huge thing, but it's a big part of that episode, is that we get one of the giant eagles lands as they're doing this coronation after the slap and everything has happened. And the eagle is there, and he just casually walks towards it, but he's still far away. And then it's like, all right, the eagle has chosen him. Yeah, let's he's 50 feet away from the eagle. The eagle is still screaming and flapping, and it doesn't look like it cares about anybody. Just the way of trying to turn that into a positive. It's a very political thing of making fun of politics and stuff of oh wait, the eagle has chosen it. No, it didn't. That was silly. My other one was back at the beginning of episode 1, as we kind of joked about before the episode here, is that after, we kind of get to see how Sauron is reborn after the mortal flesh he has been killed off. But I just, being big comic book guys, I felt like I'm looking at the symbiote. I'm seeing Venom right now and attacking a rat, and I'm like, wait, what is Venom doing in Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, it was absurd too. It was kind of a funny follow-up to a very brutal death that Sauron gets at the beginning of that episode. And that was what purpose did that serve? Other than some cool visual moments, because you get this very dramatic, just rolling throughout the land, trying to find another human to kind of latch onto kind of thing. And it was very absurd. And I laughed at that too. It wasn't as egregious in my mind as somebody literally walking up and slapping a blind queen and not instantly being taken out.
I just had "We are Sauron."
Right, exactly. That's exactly what happened. But overall, those funny nitpicking moments notwithstanding, it's a very stark improvement to season 2 over season 1. I know there's a lot of people that have written off the show based on how very strong opinions were around the first season, especially because, this is a very high budget, high investment show.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, from Amazon Prime. Visually, absolutely stunning, on par with the films visually, in my opinion.
Costumes, the environments, just the cinematography, everything just looks so good.
Yeah, and I think the content of the story is getting better than what it was in season 1. Not to say season 1 didn't have its faults, but I really feel by the end of that season, the back half especially, it kind of really started to pick up for me. And moving into season 2, I think they've kind of taken that momentum and they've gone, forward with it as well. And I'm excited to see where they, move this into these last, 5 episodes of the season, because now we start to get a once a week drop, which makes it a little easier to keep up with. But you'll get this story continuously moving forward for the next 5 weeks, and I'm excited to see where they take it.
Yeah, it definitely has flaws and faults in it. Like, even though it's gorgeous, and I think most of the dialogue and the acting is really good, it is telling a lot of stories that some may feel like just are not getting to the point quick enough, or
Sure, I get that.
some of the acting. Like, I know some people had problems with the dwarves but it has its flaws and issues. But I'm able, with at least this, I'm able to look past. Like I said, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. I've read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. I've watched all of Peter Jackson's films with The Hobbit and the movies. I really enjoy it. I'm not that deep into the overall lore, so I think some more of the hardcore fans of Tolkien has taken issue with some of the changes and that. But I'm like, nothing is ever going to be a straight adaptation. Even there's some that hate Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings because it changed this or it didn't include this or that. You're never going to make everybody happy, but I don't think this is as bad of a show as people have hated on the first season. It's not perfect, but I feel like they did a decent job, and I do feel like, as you said, season 2 is off to a better, smoother start than season 1 did.
Absolutely, and I think if you stick with it and you give this show a chance, I think you'll really like where they're going in the second season. I like some of the stuff that they're building towards, but it is a show you have to pay attention to. Otherwise you are going to be lost. You're going to be like, what the heck is going on? So if you're easily distracted, the recommendation is that you put your phone down and you pay attention to this show. Watch it an hour at a time. Watch it 30 minutes at a time if you have to. Watch half an episode and then kind of jump into it and finish it. But there's at least 4 or 5 story threads that they're working simultaneously at the same time, and I'm enthralled in it. I'm here for the ride. I'm enjoying it myself, but I can see where people have a little bit of a mixed bag on it just because it is so busy. But I think they're doing a good job this season of kind of, okay, now we're going and we're working towards this. We have, this very real threat of people coming to the realization that Sauron is around. He's back. He's still sticking around. And people are kind of starting to rally their collective groups together to try to figure out how to deal with this problem. And I like that it's all starting out here, but I think they're all going to eventually converge to this one point where they're all going to realize that Sauron is the big threat. And now it's going to be that battle that we did see kind of play out with the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. And I think that's eventually where they're going, and I'm excited to see them get there.
Yeah, and by the end of episode 3 here, we got the next set of rings are being crafted, but we also have a little bit more sinister, kind of what Elrond was afraid of with the Elven rings. We're seeing like, all right, he may not have been fully right about the Elven rings, but it looks like the next set of the rings is going to have what he's afraid of, because we see a certain character has their hands in the development and making of the next set of rings, and it's going to be curious to see how that plays out and see if we see the corruption of those characters. And then we have the different groups have their different set of rings. So we have the second set now. We got to see how that plays out, but also see where the third set of rings gets created and what kind of happens because of that.
Yeah, once you get to the ones with the men, that's going to be very interesting, because one of the main characters in that is kind of on his own adventure. If you recognize the name from the original trilogy of movies, especially at the beginning there, where they talk about this main guy, you see what he eventually becomes, and he's definitely not there yet, but he's on his way, and it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of works his way into here and kind of gets involved in the whole rings of the men, right? So it's going to be fun to see them get to that point. But like I said, I'm excited to see where they take this story, and I'm all in so far. So I'm looking forward to the next episodes.
I do have to say, like, his reintroduction that he was alive, which we're not giving the name just so we don't give anything away. That was a creepy scene, like especially if you have a certain issue with insects, a certain type of insect, that it was even creepier than kind of the movies it did. Like, it was very intense scene. And like I said, one of the biggest surprises I had of this season, because I remember the first season, but I don't remember being as kind of violent, like kind of graphically almost violent. that we've seen in the first 3 episodes. Like, there's been some kind of brutal violence in these first few episodes. There's some that was a little more tame, and others that were like, okay, they went there.
But what I think the show does a good job of is kind of balancing it out, though, because you have some of the brutal, more violent stuff, but then you have some of the more lighter-hearted stuff, especially when you're dealing with like Nori and the wizard. Like, you get some of that lighter-heartedness of it too. It's not all gloom and doom. So there's a little bit of lightheartedness to it as well. And, I think it does a good enough job of kind of keeping everything on balance. There's a lot of doom and gloom and, violence, but I think there's just enough of that warmth and hardiness too that kind of not completely balances it out, but gets it to a more, palpable level where it's just like, man, I'm not depressed watching this, but like it's a fun watch. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, because even with the dwarves, a lot of them have been about the humor and the jokes, but we got a little bit of kind of heart and sincerity with these episodes and stuff, but still got plenty of the humor, and especially with just how stubborn dwarves are and playing off of that. But yeah, I've enjoyed the first 3 episodes. I think it's a solid start to the second season. It's not perfect. It has its issues, but I think they've really got it off to a good start.
Yeah, and we're excited to see where they go. Like I said, it's a weekly drop from here on out. There's 5 more episodes. The last episode's going to drop the first week of October, so we're excited to kind of go on that journey now and see where this show goes. I believe we're going to be reviewing this every week now since it's out, and we're going to talk about it, episode by episode, and we can kind of hyper focus on it once we get to the next week's episode, kind of dive a little further into it and see where they're going from here, and just kind of going along for the ride. I'm excited to see where it takes us.
Yeah, so Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power Season 2, the first 3 episodes are available on Prime Video for you to watch now. What is it, every Thursday we're going to get the drop?
I believe so, yes.
Because the first 3 dropped on a Thursday, so I'd assume it's going to continue that Thursday drop.
Thursday or Friday typically is when they drop.
Get you right before the weekend, but again, we record normally on a Sunday, so getting over 3 hours worth of episodes on a Thursday to have it ready for the episode recording. It's like, all right, we got a little bit of binging to do here.
Oh, but it was worth it.
Yep. So moving on to our film review, we decided to check out AfrAId this week. We actually kind of were looking at what was out, and this was kind of the main one that we had available to us this week. And so this is another horror thriller from the Blumhouse group. It's all about AI. So we've talked about AI quite a bit, about how we feel with the strikes and actors and voice acting and everything else. But this is more about the technology itself of, are we getting too trustworthy about this AI? So, and the main story revolves around John Cho's character and his family. He works for a marketing firm that gets this company coming to him, wanting him and them to be able to help sell this out to everybody, to try to get it, marketed right, to get it into everybody's homes. So they decide to give him the AI to use in his house so that he can get a feeling for how it works.
Yeah, the AI is called Aya, and it's like a souped up version of Alexa, right? It's this adaptable.
There's jokes at Alexa's expense in it.
I jokingly use Alexa because they very much crap on Alexa in this, and it's a very meta take on it. But yeah, it's something that, like, the way that it works is, there's this main AI base where Aya is kind of housed, and then you have like different cameras and stuff set up throughout the house to kind of interface and integrate.
They call
with the
eyes.
AI. They call them eyes, but yeah, it's helping pick up data that you collect, and this AI eventually, kind of learns the family, learns how, they operate day to day, and then it just kind of starts integrating itself into their day-to-day lives, like to help their kids focus on doing their chores. It offers them points to, in a way to kind of appeal to the kids to do their chores. Like, you can redeem these for extra screen time or what have you. Like, it all feels like a very helpful and useful integration for your day-to-day lives, until it's not. Obviously, it's more of this horror suspense where it kind of starts taking liberties with things, and it starts it starts to have a very dark turn very quickly.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been this way to several movies lately, but I was just kind of mad to this film by the end. It was a very just kind of okay, because it just goes kind of heavy, almost caricature with the characters and other 100%. Stuff. Like, the kids are, all the kids at school are very typical type of modern day bully kids, and the AI is doing exactly playing on everyone's what they need and helping them out, and just kind of everything was very stereotypical and there was no real surprises for me with this movie. Everything was very telegraphed. Everything was very easy to see what was going to happen next. So it didn't really hold me that well with it. I don't think it was a terrible movie, but it was just one that was just, it didn't really offer anything new to me when it comes to horror, suspense, or anything else. Like, just because I saw everything coming that happened, and yeah, just like the actors did their best with everything that they were given. But again, everything was just like plain simple, out in the open. We're not doing anything different. Even they tried to mix in some more jump scares and some other stuff like that, but in the end it didn't really matter, and it was just like, it was just it was okay.
Yeah, the jump scares felt a little out of place, like it wasn't really necessary, but
because it wasn't that type of film.
Yeah, I get why they kind of threw it in, but I think at the end they were trying to trying to do the whole be cautious about AI. Like it's, we joke about Skynet because it's kind of the default like artificial intelligence type stuff, because it's the very introductory base like type stuff that they touch on in like Terminator and stuff. But like, what happens when these things become sentient and start to learn and adapt and think for themselves? And there's some very real like things that have come from AI that we've seen, like how it does adapt. And if you start giving it the ability to, include emotion and let emotion kind of drive your decisions kind of thing. And it was okay, I agree, in just the sense of that, but it was a lot of very predictable stuff. So there's, a scene where the young girl is, for lack of a better term, she's sexting with her boyfriend, and then comes to find out that he makes this deep fake, like, adult video that goes out on everybody's social media that they see, and then Aya helps the girl clean it up and fix it. And unfortunately, that boyfriend, kind of gets some really serious stuff thrown his way, and maybe meets a particularly grim fate in the movie. But it wasn't breaking any new ground, like you said. It was kind of a fun take on how this AI is affecting multiple people, and we're kind of curious to see how these other. There's no real telling on how like it has this grip on other people as well, because it's so focused on his family. You start seeing other people are affected by it too, and you don't really get an explanation as to how. Like, is there a version of this in other people's homes too that we're really seeing it? But it really feels like it's everywhere now, and like how it's got this grip on other people and not just his family. It was a little confusing on my end.
Yeah, it opened up a few threads like that. Especially there's an RV that has been parked out front of that. We feel like these families, because it starts off showing us a different family and something that happens there, and the RV's there, but we never, I don't think, unless I missed seeing, because I mean, there's a little girl playing on a tablet, and it's the same video that's shown to the next family, so it's kind of clear that they had Aya in their home, but it never really showed it. But the RV was, who was the people in the RV? Was it the people from the company? Like, who exactly were they? It didn't really reveal who the RV people were, and you just have to guess it's the people from the company or something. A little light spoilers, but I don't think anybody's going to be too upset about being spoiled by a very predictable movie here. But yeah, I mean, because it tried to do a lot. Like, I do agree with you that it did paint the dangers of AI pretty well, of just having access to everything is such a bad thing, because she ends up incorporating herself into everything, into their laptops, into their phones, into their radios, which that one was kind of like, well, I mean, there's technology in radio, but could an AI take over a regular boombox? So we've got all the advanced technology and stuff in this movie with electric cars and home automation and all that, but then we have a boombox that gets taken over. I'm like, well, does that have any intelligence to it to where an AI could try to take over it and use it? But yeah, overall, it didn't wow me. It didn't really do anything to me. It was just like, okay, that was a movie I watched by the end. Because, like you said, we get it, it's laser focused on this family and the dealings with them. But, when we bring in the other characters, we don't get any backstory, get anything else on them and why or how it's happening. Because we get them doing some pretty dark and dangerous and stuff like that. But we don't really figure out why. And it just didn't really matter in the end to the story overall that happened.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of one very absurd scene. So this company is trying to recruit Kevin, who's played by John Cho, to come work for the company, right? So he's this brilliant marketer working on trying to sell this to everybody. And they're like, cut out the middleman, leave this company that you're working for, and eventually this boss that he has that he feels like he owes his entire career to, and he's very fiercely loyal, but the company offers him basically a blank check to come work for him, and he turns it down. Well, what does the AI do? The AI buys the company, and I see why you're making that face, because now you're coming to the same...
I was going to touch on that as well.
Yeah. It's the most absurd part of the movie for me, because like all of a sudden he gets called into the office and you don't know what's happening.
Like an emergency.
Man,
you need to show up now.
You have to show up now. And the emergency is the company's been bought. I'm happy. I'm making money. I don't care what they do to you. Like, he reveres this man so much, and this man is just so willing to just cast him aside because he got a blank check.
Especially that dialogue. It's like, it doesn't really matter anymore because I am so rich.
Oh, it was so over the top and overplayed. I laughed so hard when I saw this. Because
like, you do what you want, but I don't care. I'm rich.
Yeah, congrats. You won the seat. You won the war for this job or something. Like, maybe he secretly always felt
that video game boss line that he made before that, like, oh yeah, bosses in video games are normally the ones you're trying to defeat. So he comes back to that line in that scene. It was like, look like you defeated the boss now. Oh, I'm leaving. I'm rich.
Yeah, see you later. It was just so stupid.
It was so silly.
That was probably the goofiest part of the movie. But at the end of the day, it's just okay. It's just an okay film. It's not breaking any new ground.
It really wasn't much because it's taken out there, not to cut you off again, which I do often. It's labeled as a horror thriller suspense, and there really isn't much. I mean, you get a minute here, a minute here, but in the end, like, there really isn't much horror, suspense, thriller aspects to it. Like, it was very thin on its overall horror premise.
Yeah, outside of a couple small attempts at a jump scare, like, it's not really a horror film. I think it's just horror film because of the production company that made it was Blumhouse, but it would have worked fine on its own as more of just a suspense thriller, I think. Not really trying to label it as a horror film too much, because it was more suspense than anything else.
And very little to the suspense.
Yeah, and not a ton of that either, but I don't know. It could be just you and I being two jaded people, but like but it didn't leave us so much in suspense. So we were just kind of like, all right, let's see what this does. That makes sense.
I do feel like we're turning into the Muppets here recently with Walter
Statler, baby.
Statler. We're just hating on everything.
That's my dream goal. I want us to be those two so badly, just up in the balcony, making unnecessary comments and laughing about it. That's my vision for, my golden years, so to speak.
But we've had so many movies this year that looked decent going into it. Yep. Like Trap, we were actually looking forward to it. AfrAId, which I saw one trailer. It looked okay. I didn't have a lot of high hopes going into this, but we've had a lot that have seemingly tried to be something or show itself as something, and it's none of it at all. Like, once you actually get to the movie, it's like, wait, you hyped it up to be this big, suspenseful thriller horror type of movie, but when you actually get the movie, it's very thin on all those elements that you tried to sell everybody on.
Yeah, the trailer, it's another one of those cases where I think the trailer is the best part about the movie, really where the trailer kind of highlights the better parts of it. But when it's laid out across an entire movie like that, it just, like you said, it doesn't feel as important to me. And that's some of the films we've seen. Obviously, everything we see can't be a home run, fantastic movie that we enjoyed. I don't think it's a bad movie in any sense of the word. It's not bad, but it's not that good either. Like, it's just one of those, like, you could go see it, and it's one of the rare cases where I'll say you don't have to, like, run out of your house to go see this in the theater type thing. I think it would be okay, like, watching at home on a streaming service when it eventually makes its way there. I think this is where that kind of movie will fall for me. I don't think it's as bad as Trap.
No.
It's definitely not as bad as Madam
I think Trap was a bigger letdown. When it comes to the horror, suspense, thriller movies, Trap was a bigger letdown to me than this one was.
And it's definitely not a Madam Web, right? No. So it's definitely not that. But it's okay. Like, it's a fine movie to kind of, like, if you're sitting at home on like a Saturday night and you're just looking for something to kind of throw on to kind of, get through like an hour and a half to 2 hours, like, this is fine. This is a good, like, just sit down and kind of chill, turn your brain off type movie. Like, those are fine too, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you're not going to gain anything spectacular from watching this movie, but it was fine for what it was, but we're not breaking any new ground.
Yeah, and it probably won't be one that I'd ever really feel like I want to revisit and watch again. It did what it did okay. We leave it at that, but it was just okay. It was kind of mediocre. It wasn't terrible bad. Like I think the acting overall was pretty good, and it tried to do a decent little story, just nothing really mattered that much in the end. Like, and where it left off too kind of left open, kind of like Trap, like, or wait, well, we got an ending, but is it kind of more setting up for a sequel and we're not done with it? And we just didn't get, I mean, we get the grip of technology on everybody and how it's used in everything, but we've got this AI who's just got everybody under their thumb, and we just didn't dive too deep into how it's able to do that and be so sentient, because it's in the cloud, but the cloud still requires technology to be a cloud. Right. So she's just like, say she's beyond technology, she's in the cloud now, she can be anywhere. But yeah, that's true, but not all clouds are connected, and not everything is as connected, even though it's trying to get there. But it was just kind of thin on that point of how she's affecting everyone at all times and able to pay attention to everything. Because we get that she can process information so quickly and differently, but it was just like, okay, how does she have a grip on just everyone, and why is, because we get that her knowledge base is created from the internet, so she gets, of course, the very dark parts of the internet, and that's what she's kind of gripping on. But the family was supposed to kind of show the better and the love and the more heart, but it didn't seem to have that big of an effect as the movie and the story tried to make it out to be.
Yeah, it didn't have the effect that I think they were hoping it would, and it just could have been the way that it was written. But, like, the family's a very loving family. Like, they all love each other, care about each other, and that type of thing. With, you know, the kids at different levels in their lives as well too. You got the teenager, you got like the preteen, and you got the young, like the younger kid. Like, I want to say he was like 5 maybe. 5 or 6.
I think he was going to school, so probably around 6.
5 or 6. So like it's a definitely an interesting dynamic family wise, but they I don't know, like it happened. It was a thing. Like, it didn't hit the mark for me like I hoped it would. But at the end of the day, I'd say if I had to give it a score on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say it's probably like a 4.5 to 5.
Probably around a 4, yeah. It's just kind of okay.
I think it's okay. It's worth it. I think it's worth a watch once, but it's not one of those, like, if you see it once, I'm probably not going to come back to it after.
Yeah, it's like, that's a thing I saw. It's done.
Right, and you can just kind of put it on the shelf, forget it was there, unplug it like the AI, like they do in the movie. But it happened. It's over. It's done, and I'll leave it at that. And AfrAId is in theaters now. If you want to go check it out, please do. Form your own opinion. If you see this movie and you think completely different from what we do, come tell us. We'd love to see your perspective on it and hear what you think about it as well. So leave a comment on the video if you've seen it. You know, come to our social medias, come to our Discord, tell us about it, and see if you felt any different about it than we did. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Moving on to what's coming up this next week. So it's kind of a lighter week, but it's got a film that we're really looking forward to seeing, because it's been over 30 years since Beetlejuice came out. So we got Tim Burton and Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, everybody's back. Catherine O'Hara. Everybody is back for Beetlejuice. It looks like a throwback. Like, it looks such practical effects. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing how Tim Burton revisited this character and how well he's done with it, because it was one that was a big part of our kind of childhood, which I say, like, I watched the made-for-TV version, so some of the language that Beetlejuice had in it, because I think it was PG at that time, but I think there's an F-bomb and more dropped in, and it's like, wait, there's that type of language in this movie? Because we would get it back in our day. We'd get it on, like, Saturday afternoon movies and stuff, so it was edited for TV.
Absolutely.
So, you know, to see how that translates 30 years later into a new film, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I've had circled on my calendar since they announced the film. This is one that's been rumored online for years. Mm-hmm. I know Winona Ryder's even had it written into her Stranger Things contract that if they got the chance to make this movie, like, she wanted to be able to make sure that this got shot and recorded as well. And I know they're well into shooting the final season of Stranger Things now, but she did get the opportunity to make this film too, which is kind of like a passion project of hers. It's one of her, early famous roles that she got to take on that kind of made her a star back in the day. And, it's finally getting made. I know a lot of people are very excited to see this. I'm of the belief that it's either going to be really, really good or really cheesy, and I'm kind of here for both. So I'm excited to go check that out this week.
Yeah, overall, I don't think there's been a Tim Burton film that I haven't at least enjoyed mildly. Like his Dumbo adaptation was kind of okay, but that was kind of a weird one to try to take into live action. Especially, I thought it was a strange choice to bring Tim Burton into that one. It was just like, all right, Tim Burton and Dumbo. Even he said, like, yeah, that's something I would never really do again. Like that, it actually made him not like doing movies anymore. And then he said Beetlejuice got him back into his love of his filmmaking and stuff, but it's also returning to his character and his property and having kind of full control over it instead of being controlled by Disney and being told what to do with, Dumbo and everything. But I'm hoping it's at least solidly good. Like, we're not saying Beetlejuice was an Oscar-worthy over the top. Like, it was a silly, goofy, over-the-top film, and I'm hoping we get the same in this.
Yeah, hold a lot of love for that film, the original. It's absurd and fun in its own ways, and excited to see the updated version of, the sequel here that's coming out. Also added Jenna Ortega to the film, so she's fantastic as well. So looking forward to that one this week for sure.
Yeah, immediately when they said they were going to do a sequel, you think with how long it's been that they're going to have a kid, and I think 100% of people, when they were like, all right, if they're going to do it so much later and there's going to be probably a kid in here, who's going to play Lydia's daughter? It's got to be Jenna Ortega. Like, 100%. There's no, I don't think there was anybody else in any else's mind of who would be playing Lydia's daughter. Like, it had to be Jenna Ortega taking on that role.
Yeah, and the great work that they, her and Tim Burton did together for the Wednesday series, I think definitely, helped foster that relationship to have her want to be a part of this film as well. And yeah, just absolutely slam dunk casting in my opinion. Like you said, it's the perfect person to cast in that role, and I'm excited to see what she does in this one, what she adds to the film for sure.
And we're kind of in that lull when it comes to new stuff on streaming and TV. It's, the new seasons of everything is going to start kicking off here in September for a lot of stuff. So we don't have a whole lot new, but we do have, and we've talked about it with Apple TV Plus a lot. They have some really fantastic shows, but I don't think a lot of people know about them. Yeah. So we got Slow Horses season 4, which that kind of surprised me. It's already in season 4, and it's starring Gary Oldman and several others.
Yeah. It's even got Olivia Cook, who plays Queen Alicent in House of the Dragon, if you're watching that. She's also in this series. But yeah, season 4. And you're like, how did they get season 4? That's on Apple TV. We've gone into, conversations before about how they're not the best when it comes to marketing their own TV shows. Mm-hmm. But there's so many good things that are on that service that I think it's worth more than what I pay for it, honestly, because there is such a lot of good stuff that I'm still kind of diving into and getting into watching, and that's another one that I'm gonna jump into. I love Gary Oldman. He's a fantastic actor, and definitely excited to see what this one is about, because the premise of the show looks pretty neat.
Yeah, because this had some critical acclaim and everything else behind it, but I don't think that many people, like, I've lightly heard about it, but I haven't checked it out yet, just because it was one of those where just you didn't hear about it, and now it's season 4. I'm like, wait, how's it already in season 4? Right. I thought I just heard. I thought I just heard about it existing, and now it's on season 4. Yeah. But we have that coming out, and then we have one for the family. So we have the Lego Pixar Bricktoons, season 1 on Disney Plus. Both of those are out on September 4th. So you've got something that's definitely for more adults, and now we have something for the kids. It's taking Pixar and Lego and putting those together. They've had a lot of success bringing Star Wars and Lego together. The Lego Marvel game was a lot of fun. So now seeing them get more and doing a series on Lego Pixar should be a lot of fun for families to watch together.
Yeah, definitely one for the kids to enjoy. Those can tend to be fun for the adults too. I know plenty of adults that love to play the Lego games as well. Mm-hmm. The Star Wars ones were really popular. The Harry Potter games was really popular. So it's a fun show for the whole family to check out for sure.
Yep.
So that's going to do it for this week's episode. We can't thank you enough for all your continued support. Coming up next week, we are going to be reviewing the 4th episode of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime. And we're also going to have a review for Beetlejuice. Very excited to check that movie out. Like we said, like our video, leave a comment, do all those things. Thank you for joining us. Until next week, I am Josh. He is Brad, and we'll see you then.